Welcome to this Excel 2016 lesson on absolute and relative references. When you add cell references to a formula, you can make the references to the rows and columns absolute or relative, so that when you copy the formula to other cells with the fill handle, the references to the cells in the formula stay locked or increment to refer to other rows or columns that you are moving relative to. In this example, I'm going to multiply a row of numbers by 2. In A2, I'll type equals, then click A1, then times 2, press Ctrl Enter. When you add a cell reference to a formula, the default state is relative reference. Now when I copy the formula across the columns, the column reference will increment each cell by 1 as I drag. As you see, when I double-click on cell E2, the column reference has changed to E. In each cell, the column letter went up by 1, so each number in row 1 is multiplied by 2. I'll press Escape to get out of edit mode. Now I'll delete row 2 and start again. This time I'll make the column reference absolute. In A2, type equals, then click A1. To make the column reference absolute, you place a $sign in front of the column letter. You can type it in, but there's a much better way. By pressing F4 repeatedly, you can get all the different cell references possible. Press once, and it puts a $sign before the column letter and row number. This will lock both the column and row. Press twice, and it puts a $sign before the row number. The row is absolute, and the column is relative. Press again, and it puts the $sign before the column letter. The column is absolute, and the row is relative. Press once more, and both the row and column are relative. I need an absolute column reference, so press F4 3 times. The $sign is before the column letter. Now the reference to the column will be locked in place and can't move. Type times 2, then press Ctrl Enter. I drag the fill handle and copy the formula over. The reference to column A stayed on A. Only the number 1 in cell A1 was multiplied by 2 in each cell. As you can see, when I double-click on E2, the column reference stayed on A. Press Escape to get out of edit mode. The absolute row reference works exactly the same way. Here I have rows of numbers from 1 to 5, and I'm going to do the same thing, except this time I'm going to copy the formula down the rows. First, I'll leave it a relative reference, so I'll type into B1 equals, then click A1, then times 2, press Ctrl Enter. Now I'll drag the fill handle down to B5, and the numbers in each row get multiplied by 2. Double-click B5, and as you see, the row reference has moved relative to the rows in column A, and the row reference is now 5. I'll press Escape to get out of edit mode. Now I'll delete the data in column B and start again. In B1, type equals, click A1. This time I'll make the row reference absolute. So press F4 twice to put the $sign in front of the row number. Now type times 2, press Ctrl Enter. Drag the fill handle down to B5, and as you see, only the 1 in A1 was multiplied by 2 in each cell. The row was locked on 1. I'll double click on B5 and the row reference is still on row 1. In this example and in the previous one where I locked the column, I could have pressed F4 once and made both the row and column absolute because I copied the formula only one way across the columns, or in this case down the rows. The column reference here was A in each cell anyway, so it wouldn't have mattered. It was the row that needed locked. I'll press Escape to get out of the formula. Now here's an example where you really need to take into consideration whether the row or column is absolute. I'm making a multiplication table where I'm going to copy the formula down the rows and across the columns. In B2, I'll type equals. I'll start with the rows. Click A2. Now I want the row reference to move down the column when I copy the formula down. But I don't want the column reference to move across when I copy the formula across the columns. So I need to lock the column and leave the row relative. So press F4 3 times to make the column absolute and the row relative. Now type times, click B1. This time I need the column reference relative so it's free to move across the columns, but I need the row reference locked so it stays referring to row 1. Press F4 twice to get the $ before the row reference to lock the row. Press Ctrl Enter. Now I'll drag the fill handle down to B6. So far, so good. Next, I drag across to column F. And there you go, it worked. I'll double click on F6 to see what the formula looks like. And as you see, the first factor is still referring to column A, but the reference to the row has moved relatively down the row to 6. In the second factor, the row reference is still referring to row 1, but the column has moved to column F. The trick here is to figure out which reference you need in each case. With practice, it becomes quite easy. Press Escape to get out of the formula. One more type to show you is when you'll need an absolute reference on both column and row. This would be used in a case where you don't want the reference to move at all, and you're copying a formula both down and across a table. I have here some nameless items which are increasing their value by 10% each year. In column B, I have their current value assessed, and in the next two columns, I want to calculate their value for the next 2 years. They will be multiplied by the percentage in B6 every year. So in C2, I'll type equals. I click the current value in B2. I need to add that to the same current value times the yearly increase. So I type plus, then click B2 again, then type times, then click B6. Now I'm going to be copying this formula down, then across. I don't want the yearly increase value to move at all, so I need an absolute reference to both the column and the row. So press F4 once, and both the row and column are locked. Press Ctrl Enter. Now I'll drag the fill handle down, and then across. And there's our future values. If I click into D4, you can see the reference to B6 stayed on B6, and the other cell references have incremented when I move the fill handle. Learning absolute and relative references are a vital part of working with spreadsheets. Well, that concludes this lesson on Excel 2016, Absolute and Relative. Thanks for watching!